Okay, so I'm going to try to show a pretty quick video, hopefully, of prototyping a cutscene in Unity using found assets from the Assets Store. So let's get started. 3D object. I'm going to put a plane on the ground just to start the scene, and then I want to drop in Atom from the asset from the Atom Store or the Asset Store. Now I've modified the textures on Atom here. If you look at them, they're kind of a little shinier than they are on the original model. And I'm doing this because I want to show some effects with lighting and stuff using videos that'll reflect better on a more reflective surface. Plus it modifies the asset so that he doesn't you'll notice you don't see the textures as much. I'm using the exact same textures. I've changed all the shaders to standard instead of standard specular setup, which gives me a more metallic kind of look. And I've also added this channel from his torso that wasn't really being used. It might be as occlusion, but I'm using that as a control for the metallic overlay since it's mostly white. And that gives him a more reflective surface. And then I cranked the smoothness up and tinted everything this kind of purplish color. I need to replace this video plate on his chest with a material that I've made. I believe it's called, just black. So it's got this kind of metallic circuit kind of look. Kind of like the look of it anyway, but I'm going to put it on his chest. I don't want to get too much into the textures, but you can just play around with dragging materials around. I want to delete this faceplate because I'm trying to modify him so that he's less recognizable as a character from the Asset Store and kind of becomes his own character. And I'm shooting for sort of a horror genre, so I'm going to get rid of his eyes. Let's see. So select, and those will be part of these eye nulls. So if I select both of those, you see it selects his eyes. I can just delete those. Now I've downloaded this video monitor from the Asset Store. It's got a TV as well, but I'm interested in the monitor, so I want to take one of the prefabs, this wall mount monitor, and I'm going to delete everything except for the monitor. Let's see. So if I search into this structure in the hierarchy, there's these arms you can see and the base plate. I just want to get to the monitor and lose everything else, so I'm going to take this HDTV part. It's got some level of details. I just want to take the highest one, this LOD0, and drag that out into the main scene. It'll break the prefab, but that's okay. And then I'll lose this wall mount and keep the monitor. Now I want to apply a video texture to this monitor. And a way to do that is create a 3D plane, because right now this monitor is all one model. Actually, looks like there may be a screen. Let's see. We can change that just real quick. So it's got a color, or a texture at least. Let's set it to none. Yeah, so the screen does have its own material. The trick will be that it's probably using an well, it's probably assigned. Make sure it doesn't change anything else. Alright, well, just in case it doesn't have its own material set up on the monitor, I'm going to show you the way to add the screen, because there's this bezel that you can see on the edges of the monitor. So we can just go and create a 3D object, plane, and rotate that 90 degrees. Set it at 90, and we're going to fix these. and then scale that down and pull it into place. So let's make sure the monitor itself is set for a 90-degree rotation, so it's perfectly flat. Then take this screen and pull it until it just crosses the bezel and get it sort of centered. I'm going to make sure it's covering. Alright, so scale this up a little. That's pretty good. And we may want to take this monitor now and just lose the elements on it and just make it black, because we've got a bunch of logos and buttons and stuff. So we'll keep the normal map though, so we can set this to none and make it dark, and then the same on the LCD TV parts. It's going to make it lighter, but we're going to make it black again. That way we lose the branding on it a little bit. Not that that's that important, but just as a way of editing it, modifying it, making it your own. Okay, so now we have this screen. First thing we want to do to add to the screen is add a component, and under that you'll see video, and add a video player. And if you have a video, you can just download one off of YouTube. I've got this video from The Ring, the video that they show in the movie The Ring. I want that. And I'm going to apply it. And right now it's set for material override, and it'll just play on this screen. You won't get any material textures on this. It's just going to play as a material override when you play. We want to set it to loop. Okay, so if we play that, hopefully the camera's looking in the right direction. Probably isn't, but let's see. It's going to take a second for it to load the first time. Of course, I'm looking in the wrong direction, so let me fix the monitor. Actually, let's make sure everything's set at 0, because most of our animations are going to cycle to that. We will log him down, put him on the 0 plane, and we can take this plane that we made, the second one, and make it part of the HDTV. We're going to call that screen, so that when we can move the HDTV around, we'll have it to the right angle. So then we're going to go ahead and just take the main camera and pull it, make it face them. So it'll be 180 degrees rotation. So just to check that video playback again, I want to make sure, because sometimes you'll do this and it'll actually be flipped depending on how you applied it to the orientation of the plane. So the video's playing. You notice that it's shaded too, so we're looking at the back side, and since we want this to be a TV monitor, we don't want it to actually take shading in the world. It needs to be emitting light, and that's why we need to actually turn this into a texture that we can apply to the material. So the way we can do that is, instead of using material, this rendered mode option, instead of using material override, we can set it to render to a render texture. A render texture is a way of taking like camera outputs and projecting them to a texture that you can then use in a material. So you can create like closed circuit television cameras, or any kind of way of projecting alternate views. So if you want to have an actor that's off stage and they're talking like on a video monitor, you can project that to, or even an overhead projection or a GUI projection, you can actually do that. So what we need to do is, we've got this render texture, but we don't have a render texture to render to. So if you just find a place to create a render texture. So I've got this materials folder and textures. So I want to go create, and then there should be an option for render texture here down in the light maps and material options. So render texture. Here's the render texture it created. We're going to call this ring screen. Alright, so that set is it's the render texture, and you'll notice that it's set for 256 by 256. We want to see how big our actual video texture is, the ring, whatever we captured, and we need to make the render texture the same size so that it doesn't crop. So if we select, here's our movie. I just selected it by clicking on the screen and then picking this video clip source and then clicking on it in the project window. So if you see here, it's 480 by 360. So if we go back to our render texture, which would be, actually we can just apply it here. So we've got a render texture. We'll go ahead and apply ring screen. In this case it named it 1 because I'd already made it in a previous tutorial. So we've got that, then we can select it, click on it in a project window and make it 4, what was it? It was 480 by 360. So on that render texture we make that 480 by 360. And everything else should be okay. Select the object again. Now we need to make a material, make a new material because we don't want to modify our default material. So create material, ring screen matte, and drag that onto our monitor now. So you'll see it's ring screen matte down here. And then we can apply our render texture, ring screen 1, or whatever yours is called, to it. We may want to crank up the reflection, this metallic quality on the screen a little bit, and set the reflection so that it actually reflects the background. Just a little bit, not much. And then in order to make this thing emit light, or at least be bright on the screen, we can turn on this emission channel and then set the ring screen as the color for it, which will also be the brightness in this case, ring screen 1. And we may want to just crank the brightness up, like kind of overdrive it a little bit, and you'll notice that that makes this color channel go HDR. So that's going to give us better quality lighting and make it brighter too. Since it's mostly black and white, that's okay. So now when we hit play, it should actually look as if it's much brighter and emitting light from it. So yeah, it's brighter, much brighter, yeah. And it's not taking any of the shading except for the reflection on the actual screen. I noticed that it looks like it's distorted for some reason. I just want to make sure the orientation's correct. Yeah, it's like it's getting cropped. Why would that be? So we've got this. Let's make sure our UVs are set. It may be that I accidentally hit the wrong size in the texture. So if we hit the render screen here, 480, yeah, 360. See, 256, it was getting cropped, so we want it to be 360 on the second, on the other size. Let's see now. Let's hit play. It should make the circle be more round. Of course, you can use this to crop out parts of video as well, so you can only use some of the video if you want to focus on specific things. There we go, that's good. Okay, so now we've got our video channel set up. We take the monitor and scale it. We're going to scale it just a little bit smaller so we can actually make it his face. Not too big. Alright, so let's center on it and get it centered on his head. and I'm going to rotate it just a little bit. Whoops, not that way. Let's rotate it on the X. Nope, not position. Rotation that way, so that it's in line with. And I just grabbed the rotation and shifted it. You'll notice you'll get some arrows up here. And his chin's sticking out a little bit, so let's pull it forward. Yeah. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Alright. And now, in order to make that animate with him, we just open up his hierarchy, find where his head bone is, this head object, and then drag. Let me scale this down a little bit. Drag the HDTV. I'm going to close. I can't close anything. So drag this HDTV to just inside or under the head, right there. So now when he moves, the object will move, and when he moves his head, he'll look, and then it'll actually rotate the monitor. All right, so now that we have that set up, let's talk about how we want to animate him and the kind of scene that we want to make. So we can apply, let's go ahead and apply a texture to this ground material for now. I want to make it bigger. So I'm just going to scale that up, make it pretty big. Yeah, that's good. And we'll apply, got this kind of slate material. Let's see, blocks maybe. Yeah, that's it. Except it's too big, so let's scale this down a little. So you can just set it to be, actually let's try scaling it with the actual scale of the panel, because the floor is just a little too big. That's pretty good. The blocks are too big still. So now we can make it, we can just change the tiling to, let's double it, so 34 by 30. Yeah, that looks pretty good. We'll go with that. Alright. And this is just a material that I made from some tileable textures with a bump map. One other thing, you notice this little visible root node directional motion for Adam. We can just turn that off when you select it. Just click on this mesh render and turn it off, and that way it won't show up. Now we need to animate him, so let's select, you can put this anywhere. I'm going to go ahead and create a game object, create an empty game object, call this horror timeline or scary timeline, just sort of to give it a recognizable name. Let's close Adam up here so we don't need that anymore. So here's scary timeline, and now let's if you have this timeline window open, you can just hit create. If you don't, you can open it from the Windows menu. It'll be part of the Windows menu on Unity 2017. So I select the empty object, hit create. It's going to ask me to create a timeline playable. Make sure we put that in, a place where we can find it. So assets. Now we've got the timeline. I'm going to lock it so we don't lose it doesn't keep popping off. I don't have to keep going up and selecting it. So I'm going to lock it here in the top right corner. And all it's got is just this timeline editor that's applied to this invisible object. So it's not very useful, but it's just a placeholder to hold the timeline in the scene. We can drag Adam into the timeline, and it's going to ask us what do we want to create. So we're going to create an animation track. Now, if we right-click in the animation track in the timeline, we can add from an animation clip. And I've got this zombie walk. For some reason, it's called ETC Walk Zombie that I've downloaded from the asset store. It's part of a motion capture package. So you get two flavors here. You've got a root motion walk and a non-root motion walk, which will make it look like he's walking in space. I'm going to go with a non-root motion walk because root motion is great if you have a bunch of different types of root motion, so you can string them together. So like a root motion with turns left, turns right, all those things. But I don't have that with this. I only have the walk. I don't have any idles, or at least for this particular package, I don't have an idle, and I definitely don't have turns, and I want to make him turning at some point. So I'm going to go with a non-root motion walk. And if you check out what that looks like while he's playing, it's going to look like he's a zombie sort of rambling towards you here. The other thing is it's going a little bit fast. I want him to go a little bit slower. So if you select this animation in the timeline, there's a speed multiplier in the inspector. We can just set it to be like 0.5 for speed. And that should make him go a good bit slower. There we go. All right, so, and it'll also make the length of your clip go longer too, because you're basically just doubling the playback of it. Okay, so now he's walking in place. That's not what we're going for. We don't want him to walk in place. I want to make it look like he's there's a corridor with another corridor at the end of a hallway, and I want him to come around the corner and then sort of walk towards us. So in order to do that, if we try to select him and set a keyframe in terms of this record here, if I move him in the scene, he's just going to pop back into place because even though he doesn't have a root motion, he's got an animation applied, and that animation does have keyframes set for location. So what I want is I want to be able to move him in space. So I'm going to click on him and apply an override track. And with this, you can have other animations that have mask or something like that, and just use those to override certain parts of his animation from this walk cycle. So I can make him reaching if I had an avatar mask that only affected his right arm, and just applied an animation to that. But what I want to do is I'm going to use this override track as a way of moving him in space. So I just turn on the record button here and select Adam in the timeline, and you'll notice that it can set a key. So I'm going to make him start over here, coming down a corridor. Let's make sure we're positioned right. Yep. I'm going to rotate him 90 degrees, and that'll be my first key. So then I want to make him walk for a certain amount of time. Right now I'm looking at frames here, so we can set our timeline instead of frames to be seconds. So I want to make him walk for like 5, let's make it 6 seconds to get to the corridor. Maybe more than that, but we'll set this for now. I'm going to just block it out. So I want him to get to here. That's probably not nearly enough time, but because you're also going to see, like, when he's walking, he's sort of skating across the surface. Now the way to fix that is we could hand key his feet in place to get him to move the way we want, and that's going to take a while. And plus, we may not need to, if he's not even seen, we may not need to animate the keyframes. We don't know where our camera positions are going to be yet. So I'm just blocking this out for the purpose of getting positions and camera shots, and then I'll come back and key the frames that need the right movement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stretch out his playback over time here. I'll select the graph that I created and select this key, and if I start moving and then hold down shift, it'll lock it in place, and I can drag that out over time. So let's see if we can get him to move without skating. So it's walk, He's sort of going. He's kind of easing into it fast. It's a little better, but he needs more time. So just select the keys, drag, it's looking pretty good. It's going to ease here at the front, but again, we don't care about that. That's in the easing of the time, the playback of this timeline. So he sort of starts to walk, and then he eases into the motion. He's doing a little skating, but that's not too bad. Maybe we just move it a little bit more, or we can look at the timeline itself. Stop recording. If we look at his animation, you notice how there's these blend curves and there's this auto time where it's going to ease into the animation. If we set that to manual and click on this curve, and that's the end, we should be able to just create a linear. Just click on this and create a linear, and it's going to go linear in, linear out. So he'll start walking right away, which gives us a little bit better sort of walk cycle. So that's pretty good for a start. It's not great. He's definitely slipping, but in terms of getting this thing blocked out, it's good enough for now. Okay, so let's go back and record the turn. So I'm just zooming here. Record the turn. Oh wait, the out of the curve needs it too, so manual, we'll set that. So now it's like he's just walking in place right here. So what we want to do is make him turn the corner. So let's record. I'm going to make him go from here to 4 steps. Here to like here, and then rotate. To face us. Now the trick on that rotation is you notice that when I created it, it's got this huge arc. So he's going to be slowly rotating as he's walking here because I didn't set a key here. But I set the key there. So if I come back here to the keyframe where I start the turn and just set my rotation back to 90. Was it 90? Let's see, 90? Yeah, 90. He'll start slowly easing into the rotation there. So he's coming slow, okay. So it's not too bad. So step, rotate, walk. Could probably use some work there, but again, we don't know if we're even going to be looking at his feet in terms of slipping there. The question is whether or not he's doing it over the right amount of time. So it starts here, and it's not too bad, but maybe it can occur a little bit slower because it's happening in about 2 seconds. I might want him to turn slower. Yeah, that's better. But he probably needs to come forward just a smidge. Let's make sure we're selecting. I accidentally added a keyframe there in the wrong place. So the point is to zoom in so you can actually see your keys. Oops. So we're really zoomed in. Make sure you're on the right frame, the right key. Okay, so now we can grab and drag him just a little bit forward. That's better. Alright, you can zoom back out. I'm just mouse wheeling to get it to zoom out. And so he's coming there. Okay. And we'll zoom out on our timeline again. Let's make him go a little bit longer. Actually a lot longer, but then we're going to animate him walking down the corridor, so it'll come to that, and then we'll select him. So again, he eases here. So on our keyframes, they're set for this auto on the out on this keyframe. Let me zoom in on them so you can see there's a little bit of a curve difference here because of the angles. So what we can do is, and it's the rotation is the trick, or the position. So if we open up the position and we select each key, you can right click on the actual key, and you want this right tangent. You want it to go linear instead of free, which will take away the tangent, and it'll make the motion, the acceleration motion, solid coming off of them. And in this case, we're going on the z-axis, so that's the one we really care about. Right click, right tangent, linear. So now when he animates coming out of this, there's going to be no acceleration, it's just going to be constant. Maybe too the same thing coming into the as far as position, coming into this we can do linear also, so both tangents can be linear. And then we have to do the same thing because you got, again, this little, you can't hardly see it, but you got a little bit of a curve coming out of this. So let's do linear on this, because linear motion's okay for what we're going for now. We may have to come back later and change that, but with the ease in, ease out stuff is not necessarily what we want when we're blocking this out. So we're going to go both tangents constant, or linear, and that's just coming into the see what happened there. There's a little X position too, so got to change that one to linear. Both tangents linear. This one, both tangents linear. That way it doesn't skate on the right. Actually, looks like he's starting to shift there and he's still moving forward. So what we can do is just pull that and kind of round out the curve. Yeah, that's better. So now he kind of accelerates there and starts skating. That just means we need to stretch out this keyframe more, because it's too fast. He's going too fast for the distance that he's covering. So if we take our position keys and just grab them, hold down shift as you start to drag, and that should help him not skate. So let's see. It's pretty good. Alright. So we've got his motion blocked out. Let's see what that looks like. So it kind of eases into it there, but that's okay because we're probably not going to be looking at him at that point. And we can fix that with the linear. Yeah, he's got a lot of skate going, but again, we're not seeing it in his feet. And all we're doing is talking about blocking the scene out. Okay, so that's pretty good. The thing is, and the reason that I did it this way is I may want to add some other animations into this timeline. Like when he comes around the corner, I may want to insert an idle animation, so he's sort of thinking about turning instead of actually turning. So we can do that by creating a split. Let's close this. We're going to zoom in on this keyframe where he actually starts the turn. So he stops here, and we can right click on the actual animation track, and notice that when we zoom in on this, the place that I'm talking about stopping is not at the repeat on the animation, which is going to cause it to jump when we try to jump back into this coming out of a stop. But we can fix that using this clip end spot right here. So right now it's set for 0 because we're in the middle of a lot, but when we do it at the start, then we can actually adjust the place where the clip will start. So we'll go ahead and split. The other way we could do is we could grab these keys and move them so that they do start and stop on a split, on a repeat. But for now, we're going to do it this way. So right click. Also, right click on this. You're going to get editing and then split, and that's going to split this key, but it doesn't split our override track because you can't do that from this. But what you can do is you can turn this override track into an animation clip. If we do that, we lose our ability to edit it. So we can do convert clip. Well, no, actually we can convert the clip to a track. So yeah, we can come back and edit. So we can let's do this, convert to track. So now he's got this animation track applied. This is a secondary, it's an override animation, but we can now do a split here. Editing, split. Then we can grab these and control to select the two and then drag them out. And we can insert a new animation clip right here. So add from animation clip. We're going to do, I think there's a zombie idle. Yeah, I got this from a different package. So we'll add that. It's going to add it to the end instead of where we wanted it. And that's just this sort of positional idle here that's too fast. So let's make it make it the same speed, 0.5. And we also want to align it to this. So if you right click on this track, say match offsets to previous clip, that's going to put him position wise in the same spot. So let's bump it up so it goes from here. We need to, wait, which one? Which one has its position? I think we lost our relationship to, let's see what happens if we play. It's like we lost our, no, he's in position. Okay, now that fixed it. So for some reason it kind of locked. So you can see where he walks and then it jumps here. We just need to match this. Match offsets to previous clip. So everything lines up now. Actually, match offsets to next clip. There we go. So he stops, looks, and then when we get this in position, it should. So shift control. And then he'll start walking from there. Match offsets to previous clip. There we go. So he'll stop, wait, and the question is how long to make him wait. So probably less than this. Select like this, and pull this a little short. It's also going to need to transition. Actually, we want to put this not in the lower track. We're going to put it in the actual animation track. And then we're going to give it a little bit of an overlap. So it's like he stops and comes and waits. That's good. It's got a little bit of a blend there. And he'll wait. And then hold down Control if you want to select different tracks, and then just do a little bit of a blend out. Maybe more than that. Yeah, nice and slow. There we go. Now he's decided to turn down this. And what we'll do is we'll also, about halfway here, make him stop and then start up again. So, like here, we're going to do another split. Editing. Let's select them both and see if we can split them at the same time. Control, editing, and split. Yep, they both split. Control to select, and then we'll take this idle and duplicate. And luckily it comes in the same spots, and we're going to make it. So we're going to make it it's offset to the previous. That's good. Blend it a little bit so that we get a little bit of a transition into it. And notice that he shifts and he's skating, so that means it's too much. You kind of want it to happen where his legs are halfway. So what's going on when he comes into here? He's still taking a step, so it doesn't get far enough. So what we can do is pull this out a little bit longer and wait till he gets a halfway point. So that way he steps into the pause. And again, he's skating a little bit, but it's not so bad that we don't even know if we're going to be looking at him there. Maybe over less time. That's good. So he's still, and the other thing is, like when he takes that step, we might even stop just moving him by taking this track and shortening it so that there's no movement that can occur during. There we go. During the plant. Alright, so then we take Control and drag these, get the overlap, and he starts walking again. That's good. Alright, so there's our blocked out animation. We will shorten this. Good. Alright, now we want to build this set around him and get the lighting going. So in order to do that, I like to use this tool called ProBuilder. You can download it for free. There's a basic version that gives you a lot of functionality for being able to build objects within Unity. The advanced version that you have to pay for, but has a ton more features, is nice too. So we just bring up the ProBuilder window. I'm going to make it part of my tabs up here on the hierarchy. I'm just going to say New Shape. And I'm going to add a cube. You can add a whole bunch of other things like stairs, whatever. But the cube is a good place to start. The thing I like about ProBuilder is that when you edit these options, so when you get this built in the world, you can select faces, edges, polygon, or vertices, or the whole object. But when you actually select those and start to manipulate them, you don't lose your UV maps. They stay projected, which is really nice as far as a function for being able to kind of build in world and not and shift things around. So you can see I'm shifting this hallway so that it's in line with the camera. And what we'll do is we'll actually even go out to where he starts to make the turn so I can get the corner just right. So if I take this face and pull it up to him, so he kind of comes in the timeline. So you can see I can actually build to the animation, which is really nice. So I want him to just walk around the corner and look. So my corner here is too wide. Like he's just come around the corner. You can see him there. And then when he walks, that's fine. Something like that. Yeah, maybe he can come around a little bit more, so he's a little more centered when he gets into the hall. There we go. And I want this to be like a really tall hall because I don't want to be able to see the ceiling. I want it to kind of fade to black. So we can pull this back beyond our camera. And then another nice feature is that you can box model with this. So like if I take, actually the question is he too close to the wall there? Yeah, that'll work. So if I want to make the next corridor or the next wall, I just hold down Shift and drag this out. And suddenly I've got additional polyfaces to pull. So I can make a corridor going this way, and I can make a corridor going this way. And it's really kind of useful. Now I've got this entire thing, but it's all facing outwards. If I go inside, you'll see I won't be able to see any polygons except for the ones that are facing out. But if I select it using the select object mode selection and just select the model, I can flip the UVs or invert them. So under my Pro Builder menu, this flip normals. So now everything's facing inward. And I have my hallway. And I want to apply material to this hallway. So I want to get, let's see, probably, let me just figure out a material to drag onto it here. Got one, I just can't remember what it was called here. Tile. The slate. Yeah, that's it. So it's got this nice reflective kind of alien pattern sort of slate going. Right now, that's a good start. So right now I'm using this global illumination, and I'm going to try to make the whole thing stay with global illumination instead of just modeling and baking lights. I want to show how you can get some really nice lighting in real-time lighting that actually animates using real-time global illumination. So if I select by edge, this far wall here, I'm going to try to create a toe light that gives me a glow at the foot, and use that to help light the scene. So if I select this edge, I can do insert edge loop right here, and that's going to put an edge loop that's going to go around the entire object. I'm just going to make it come up like that. So then I can take and just pull these faces on the walls out. So if I select by face and just pull that out a little bit, it's going to have this overhanging ledge. The same thing here with these. Whoops, forgot to hold down Shift. Alright, and then this one. And then this far edge here too. Alright, so there, let's see, pull it out a little bit wider. Now I can select this lower section, just the base, and I'm going to apply a light emitting texture to it, or material. which will give the floor a nice glow. Just need to select all of these faces, and then the ones down at the bottom, back of the hallway too, just for consistency. Make sure we've got them all. And then I've got this material in ProBuilder. I've got this material editor. If I just bring that up, I've already got a bunch of materials applied here. I'm going to take this light material and just apply it to those faces. So now, by doing that, I get this glowing light material, which is just has an emission channel turned on to white. This, and it's set for HDR and fairly bright. You notice that when I did that, this it's going and baking, because you have to have your object set for in order for global illumination to work. You have to select your object and make sure it's set for static. Even though we're not baking light maps, we're baking real-time global illumination. So if you look in your lighting setting, you're going to have baked global illumination. We can turn that off. It doesn't change anything, doesn't go and rebake. We're going to have this real-time global illumination turned on. And then we have this indirect resolution, these texels. So what you can do is, if you turn that on, and right now you see it, like I said, I want this top of the ceiling to go black. So I can turn down the indirect intensity, the intensity multiplier. Let me see here. Bear with me a second. First, we can turn off our directional light, because we don't even want that. I also want to, in our lighting settings, I want to turn off the environment lighting coming from the skybox. So we can just set that to come from a color, and it can be a dark one, that's fine. And our intensity multiplier, if we take that down, notice how it's changing our lighting slightly. We also want to take our indirect intensity down. Yeah. So if you take that to black, right now it's not doing anything. Let's actually take it up a little bit. What I want to do is I want to create a reflection map that's going to bounce the reflections and give us lighting from the actual the emittance coming from these channels. So let me make sure this is set for static, the floor here. So that'll get considered. Notice that it's going and rebaking the job. We can turn on this optimize UVs for real time here, and same thing. It's already turned on there. Okay. So it's baking this lighting. Now, in order to get the lighting working for this particular setup, we want to do some reflection probes, and we want to do some light probes for real-time objects. So to create a reflection probe, we can just go 3D or light reflection probe. It's going to put that in the scene, and you notice how we get this light automatically. It changed the way things look on the material and on the floor. So now we just need to move this and edit it to the actual shape of our object. We don't have to bring it all the way to the end here, because we don't really care. The camera's probably not going to show that as much in terms of the reflection, and it's okay. It'll make it go to darkness a little bit more. Notice that our light map baking just finished, so we get more on the floor. And the main thing is to make sure that this box, this edited box, is outside of our projected light on the floor, the toe. And the same thing here. There. And then pull it up to the top. So it can come to like there. It's fine. Same thing with the ground. So by changing this, the box shape, what we're really doing is changing the way the reflection's going to edit in terms of movement, because we're going to end up turning on this box projection mode here, and we're going to, you notice how everything got nice and reflective all of a sudden. And we're going to also, instead of using baked, we're going to make it real time, and it's going to we're going to refresh it. Instead of on awake, we're going to make it every frame. Now, this is going to eat up some of your bandwidth, but if you have a powerful enough computer, the effect will be much nicer. And it'll be in real time, so you'll actually see reflections of objects moving in the scene in real time. The last thing we want to do is we want to make sure we get this probe in the right position. But since we don't really know what the lighting setup down the hall here is going to be yet, we're going to leave it for the right now just where it's at. I'm going to pull this a little bit in, and maybe not. I don't know. I'll have to change that in a second. We'll figure it out. So there's one light probe set up, and if we look at that, it looks pretty good. It's a little bright, but we can fix it here in a sec. So now if we add another light probe going down this hallway so we can get the reflections going here. And the reason I'm not taking it, you can't, if I make the box too big, if I try to fit one box for this entire thing, the light probe's just not going to be as accurate. I want it to look like a hallway and reflect like a hallway. And the same thing for this one. So just add one more reflection probe here. We're going to get it centered. And then we'll edit the box to overlap. And it doesn't matter if we go all the way down the hall here, because we don't really care if this reflects, if it's going to be off screen. And it'll help us get a more accurate match to what's going on in this hall if we make it just a little bit narrower. You'll see what I mean in a second. Oops. The best we can do is try to get these as close to looking the same in terms of reflection as we can. So we see more up here. Okay. Now, the other thing that's important as far as these light probes go is the actual position of the light probe itself in the scene. Because if I grab this movement icon here and I can actually move the probe, it changes the way the probe renders position-wise. And since I want these guys to match positionally, I'm going to probably want them to be relatively close to each other. So I can take this one and move it. Notice how the reflection's starting to change a little. And that makes the floor match up down here a little bit better. Let me make sure this one's set to it's set for baked. I want it real time, and I want it to be every frame, and 256 for better quality. Alright, so that looks good. Now we can go back to our lighting setup and take this indirect intensity, crank up the bounces. I'm not sure if this actually has an effect on it. It does change the light probes, but I think that may have more to do with the actual environmental skybox type reflections. Let's see, make sure this is set for static, yep. Okay, and the floor set for static. Then the other thing is that I can take in the lighting, I can take the albedo boost, I can boost that up. So I can boost the albedo and take the indirect down, and it's going to make it darker. Notice how it changes up at the top. So I get that quality of receding darkness at the top here. So it's just going to be a little bit of a tweak in terms of how far up I want that to go, and how much of a boost I want from the albedo. I think that looks pretty good. Now the only other thing is, as this guy's walking around the corridor, I want him to stop, but I want to see a shadow coming down the corridor before I see him. So I can add a light, and what we'll do is we'll add a point light just as a start. Added a spot instead. Let me delete that. Game object, light, point light. And I can take that, move it down the corridor here. But now it's not casting any shadows, so let's turn those on in the inspector. So it's point, the range is 10, the mode is real time, but it's not casting any shadows. So let's make it soft shadows. And quality is going to be fine. Strength, bias. Let's see. I'm going to move this behind him. We also want to make sure we see what it looks like down the corridor. So like if we watch him walking, it needs to be casting on this far wall. It's not getting any shadows. Let's pull this up. There he is. Alright, so the trick's going to be making sure the attenuation on the light is good, because right now it's going. I can take the intensity down. It's real time. The color, maybe we'll make the color a little yellow. And check our shadow strength at 1. Can't crank it up any higher. The bias is fine. So the range, we can maybe take that down a notch. So he's casting the shadow. Maybe it can be a little higher. Let's see. Yeah, we need to increase our range a little bit too. You can just grab these dots. Yeah, that looks better because we can actually see then the entire shadow going across the wall. And then you just play with positioning the shadow. So put it more behind him. What happens? Getting low, raise it a little. There we go. So I'm just trying to play with like how this shadow crosses the wall. It's looking big, and then you see him. Let's see. Something there. That's better. Alright, so there. And then he comes, he stops, he decides to walk down this way. Alright. Let's see what that looks like. It's walking for a while. There's the shadow. Comes around the corner. You notice that I'm getting the real-time lighting coming off of the reflection, the reflection probe when his face actually passed the reflection probe. Alright, so he stops and then he walks. That's fine. Now, what we really need to fix this up is some camera work. So if we select our timeline, we can take our main camera and drag that into the timeline. And we want to create a Cinemachine track. And what that'll do is give us the ability to add various cameras that we can just create like hard cuts or fades between. So we have an empty Cinemachine track right now. The first thing is like, what do we want our first view of this hallway to be? Probably pretty close to where we're at. So we're going to add a new Cinemachine shot clip. And right now it doesn't have an actual camera because there's no Cinemachine camera in the actual scene. So we can create a new one. And that's going to create this Cinemachine camera that we can change the length on. And if we look at its position, right now it's looking in the opposite direction. So we select that camera and we can find our view. Let's make it look down the hallway, probably like a 180. And we'll go into our game view here and see, and we can actually still edit it up here in our track. So for one thing, we can change where the focus is at if we actually have a target set. If we don't have a target set, we can't actually move it around. So we could create a target for this camera. We can just create an empty game object. And we actually already have one, so we can make it the timeline object. So let's see where that is in the game. It's behind us. So if we take that and move it here, moving it doesn't have any effect on anything. It's just giving us something as a target to look at. So let's make that our target for our virtual cam. So if we select that and then under look at, we can actually make it look at the timeline. It's called Scary Timeline. Notice how the camera snaps to it. So if we go back to our game now, here's our Scary Timeline, and because we can we're targeting it, we can actually move our composition around, which is a nice way to edit this shot. So if we select our camera and dolly back on the Z, down the hall, we just find the shot that we like. So maybe it's this long shot of the hall and it's low so that we get this view of the ceiling. Something like that, just straight down the hallway as the first camera. That allows us to see the shadow when it comes across, and then as soon as he comes around the corner, I want to snap from that to, or cut to a view of, or a different camera that'll be close up on his head maybe. So let's add a new Cinemachine shot clip, create a new camera, go into our scene mode and take this camera, second camera, and make it target his head. So it'll be Adam or Bip head. It should look at it. Or we could even make it look at the monitor, which was called, it's in buried, I want to look for it. Screen even? Yeah, screen will be good. That way it'll target the screen. And then, so let's just see what that looks like in terms of position wise. So right now, here's our screen. It might be, we want this camera low to the ground, so we can lower it. And maybe closer down the hall, something like that. Not too low. Then we can just play around with the position. So he's coming, he looks. Let's drag this a little bit longer so we've got more time to look at it. So zoom, cut. So we can make that cut happen a little bit later. So we'll get a view of him coming around the hall right there. And drag that short, and then just pull this up to it. We don't want it to transition into it, so we want it to cut. Now, let's just figure out the type of camera shot we want here. So we can make it here. Compositionally. Let's see what the cut looks like there. Cut. Or we can put him over here, and it's kind of empty. Maybe make more of an angle. Let's take our camera and position it closer, a little bit down the hall more here, or to the left, lower or higher, lower, and then let's think about how it's positioned. Something like that, maybe. Our toe box is pretty high here, so we'll see how that looks. We can always come back and edit it, but so it's like enter game mode, go to game mode and look. So we see our hallway, cut. He's looking. So maybe it's a cut here. And we're going to make a second shot and edit to even a closer cut and make it transition. So add a new Cinemachine shot clip, create a new camera, take the camera and target the monitor at the bottom or the screen. And now let's just get that thing positioned. So if we we've got it selected, we're in game mode, so zoom in, make it up higher maybe. We're just going to kind of do a quick zoom. In fact, we may even just do it to where we do the zoom using a lens, because we're trying to create like this horror effect. So let's do like a field of view where it zooms. So we went to 20 degrees on the field of view. What was this one? This one was 40. Maybe it needs to be wider. Yeah, that'll give us more of a zoom. And then we can do position-wise. You don't have to get so far out. Yeah, like that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create this transition where we see a camera fade and it zooms in on him and he's walking around the corner. So I'm just changing the length of this transition. Oops, got them both selected. See what happens there. So boom, he's coming around the corner. We don't want him to start walking. We want to like change to a view, a long shot here. So let's make this really short. Let's see. Cut. Notice how I've got two cameras, but because because the overlap is like pretty much the entire length of the one, it's going to start zooming almost right away. So on this camera, I want to make sure that I hold the same position. So he's looking. All right, now we're going to do a long shot down the hallway again. Add a new Cinemachine shot clip, create a new camera. We're going to target the monitor again, and we'll position the shot with the camera selected, just zoom down the hall. Maybe it's a little higher, just barely, and then closer to the wall. Down the hall more. Yeah, that's good. And then up higher so we're not getting so much light from that toe. And then from there we can move it, yeah, like this. That looks good. Kind of a 3/4 view. Alright, based on all the light that I'm seeing coming from this toe, we can go into our game and just pull that down, at least on these parts of the hallway. So if we select our box model, the floor, just these 2 floor points, and then these. We can now go to our camera view, whichever when we're at. Yeah, so like there. And then pull this down to kind of block it out a little bit. Now that's going to change our lighting, so let's wait and bake and see what happens. It'll tone down some of the lighting brightness in the corridor, but we can get that back with post effects here in a minute. Alright, give it a sec. So one of the other things that I may want to do here is using the same effect I did on the monitor. I've created a, in terms of the video, I've created a material. It's a flicker light, and I just created a video of like an off and on, full white, full black, and a little bit of fade in between that kind of flickers like a fluorescent light. I'm going to apply that to some objects that are going to be down the hall. Yeah, I like that. So the light baked and it got a little bit darker. Yeah, that looks better. So I want to create a flicker light going on in this scene. So what I can do to create that is I'm just going to create some tube lights. So a 3D object, in this case, cylinder. Select it and pull it into the scene. And I'm going to apply this material. Where is it? It's called flicker lights. Let's do a look. Yeah, flicker light matte, and all that is the same thing I did with his monitor, but it's got and I need to apply the playback of the video. So I need to add a component, video player, and then for that I need to make the clip be the flicker light or light flicker, and set it for render texture, and the render texture will be light flicker or flicker light 1. And then in an actual flicker light material, make sure that I've selected flicker light 1 and flicker light 1. So what'll happen then is if I make this a little bit smaller and taller and pull it down the hall, well, let's leave it in the hall here just to show you what the effect looks like. See how it flickers, and it's casting its flicker reflection because it's right next to this the reflection probe. It's actually casting it pretty brightly on that scene in terms of the reflection. So what I want to do is pull that down the hall, and the flicker is just going to add kind of to this creepy, scary effect. So I'm going to pull it down the hall and put it, figure out a place to put it. I'm going to duplicate it and put it down on the other side too. Let's see what happens. So you kind of get this reflective flicker. Now I could, if I wanted to, I could put that on the toe base here. to create a flicker on that too, which would really kind of create that super flickery effect. But I don't like that the light's in the shot there. So let's pull this further back and closer to the wall. Also too, I don't want it to cast shadows. So turn off that on each one of these. Let's see. So the thing is, I'm only getting those lights in the reflection right now because there's no light probes. So what I can do to fix that is I can just create a light probe setup for this particular scene. So game object, light, and we're going to do light probes group. I'm going to scale that, get it in the scene, in the hallway at least, and then scale that wide. Yeah, that's good. And here. Then I'll select the probes, these top ones, and pull them up tall. Now I'm going to just select the corner probes and duplicate them and pull them in. And I'm just going to create like a little real-time light sampling grid so that as these lights flicker, they should, if they're real-time objects, they should add to the lighting of, or receive their lighting, but also add to the lighting of the light probes. So duplicate. Do one in the center, and the same thing for him. And I'll bring, so we don't really need the light probes up at the top where there's not much going on. We'll duplicate those and bring them down close to the bottom. Duplicate. Like that. And then one in the center. Duplicate. Okay, I may want to pull these down the hallway. So select like that, duplicate. Notice how that extends and creates a relationship between all these on the outside. Let's make sure that they're inside the hallway. And keep going. All right, that ought to do for now. So let's make sure that let's see if these are set for my light probes, or the cylinders are set for static, or they're not set for static, they're set for real time, which means they'll receive, but they won't actually affect the casting of the light. So if I can turn them to static, because they're not moving, hopefully that'll update the light probe group. Let's make sure Adam, he's good. All right, let's see. So I'm baking again. And this is just baking the real time. We'll see how that updates. Okay, let's see if we go, what else we got? Oh, let's add some more cameras while we're baking. Scary timeline. So we're to this part where he starts to walk and he's coming down the hall. Let's make sure the game. Alright, so we want him to get going down the hallway a bit. So he starts to walk, and then we'll transition to a view of him walking. So we're going to add a new camera, new Cinemachine shot clip, create a new camera, and then this camera is going to be CV5. We're going to make it look at his monitor again. And in this case, we're going to actually make it track his monitor as well. Actually, not the monitor because it'll shake around too much, but let's make it track like his, let's make it track him. So if we look at what that looks like in the game mode for this camera, you notice that we're behind him, following him down the hallway. So we can do, this follow is going to have we got the aim composer, but we've also got this body composer. So we can make it shift the view. So what we want to do is get in front of him. We're -10 behind him. Get in front of him and shift up closer because I want to do another close-up on the head. A little bit below. Zoom in more. Maybe be over to the left like that. A bit higher. A bit below. That's pretty good. And then we just figure out where we want this to be on the screen. He's going to be walking while it's happening, so that's pretty good. Tracks for a while, then he's going to come to a pause. We'll copy this. Let's see, what would this camera look like here? So if we duplicate that camera, go back to the he stops, he's looking. Maybe not that camera. Let's delete that one. We'll go to create a new one, or maybe this camera instead. Duplicate. So you can reuse your cameras, that's fine. Keep looking. Then he starts walking. So from there, change the length of that one there. I want to do a new camera. I'm going to make this one actually track back and kind of create a zoom for the final one. So add a new Cinemachine shot clip, create a new camera. This will be CV6. Let's make it look at his monitor. Actually, we'll try looking at the monitor and see. Or maybe we make it look at the timeline. And so he's already there. Where's he at when he comes? Because I'm going to do a transition and fade. Yeah, let's do that. So from there, we'll look at that, and yeah, so we're going from here to this. So we want to make this, we'll leave it looking at the hallway. I'm going to move the camera way back and up. Yeah, I should make it look at his monitor instead of the timeline. So at the bottom screen, we're going to make that go like to there, because this is going to animate. So we're looking at the screen, and I want to make the field of view go super wide. And at the same time then come back and change my zoom so I'm not getting outside of the screen. Go higher maybe, yeah. So See, I'm just kind of hiding the end of this screen there. And that means I should probably come back and change our reflection box. Reflection probe, the first one, because I'm not going all the way to the end of the hallway, so you get this darkness. So bring it to the end of the hallway. Like that. And if I look at our monitor, yeah, that's good. So let's see, and that's going to transition. So it's going to go from here to transition like that. I'm going to make it happen. Yeah. Should be, how long are we looking at this? Almost 5 seconds. It's too long. So, and zoom. Okay, and that'll be the end of our scene. It'll come. Actually, I should make it transition. Not too long. 40. Yeah, that's good. And we'll hold it there. All right, that's a start. So now the last and final part is taking our main camera and assigning what's called a post effects stack to it. So post effects give us the ability to change the look pretty comprehensively in terms of coloring and blurring and adding lighting effects and things like that. So we can add a new component. It's under effects. There's this post-processing behavior, so we just add that. It's going to look for a post-processing profile. I'm going to just create a new one, loosen the assets. So if you right-click, create, and then under the scene prefab post-processing profile, we'll call this scary movie. So that's selected. If we go back and select our main camera, and the reason we put this on the main camera is we want it to be consistent across all of these other cameras, but then we can also, I think that we can actually apply them to individual cameras, or we can create secondary cameras and use those in the CV cams and apply a secondary effect, and it should transition as well. So then in our assets, we have scary movie as our post-processing stack, and we've applied it. Nothing's happened. So the reason that nothing has happened is because we actually have to modify the effects. Right now, none of them are turned on. So the first thing we can turn on is like anti-aliasing, which will smooth up everything. We can turn on ambient occlusion, which will add a little bit of ambient lighting, or like dark shadows in the corners. You don't really need that, but it can be a nice effect sometimes. I don't really see it doing too much. If we turn on screen space reflection, you're going to see a big pop, and that's basically creating this sort of fake 3D reflection. Because we're already using these light probes that are giving us screen space reflection as well in terms of when we're inside the box, we don't really need this. This will work better on scenes where you're getting sort of like flat plane reflection planes, like for street signs or halo effects, like a video wall, or maybe neon signs. But for this, it's kind of going to give us a bunch of sparkles and stuff that we don't want. So, and it's also going to kind of fade at the edges. So I'm going to leave that off. Depth of field creates a depth of field based on the camera. So if we find a close-up here, so right now the depth of field is the focus distance. You notice if I change it, I can actually shift it and change so you can blur things in the foreground versus the background a lot. We can also change like where our focus distance is. So if we want to like move it forward and blur the background so we can focus on him. So let's see how that looks throughout the scene. So it's too blurry here because our focus distance is too close. So we may want to take this to there and then maybe create a higher f-stop. Let's go back to zoom in. The focus distance is too far now. Change our focal length. It's a little blurry up front, but that's not bad. Alright, let's leave that for now. Play around with that. Then we could create this eye adaptation so that it actually, what happens is it'll get brighter and darker depending on what's in the background. That's not going to work so much for this because it's going to over brighten things. But it's useful for when you're going from an indoor to an outdoor scene, like leaving a bunker or something. But what we do want is this bloom, and that's going to just make things pop. It's based on film bloom. Where things that are brighter automatically kind of bleed into the darker edges of things because that's the way film gets exposed in terms of film exposure when you're actually processing film. So I'm just modifying the setting here a little bit to create. So we want to, yeah, it's fine. We'll turn on this anti-flicker so it doesn't flicker because it may actually flicker depending on the settings in terms of pixel flicker. We can also add a really cool effect called this dirt. So we can create, if we just select dirt, there's this lens dirt, and it creates a kind of haloing effect in the film where you'll see these little specks. And you can crank up the intensity on that. You see it a lot more. That can be a nice effect. And then the last thing we're going to look at is this color grading. So if we turn that on, right now it's set for neutral. If we set it for like filmic, it's going to go nice and dark because film tends to be dark exposed. And you'll see, you know, everything just gets a little bit sharper, clear, kind of nice post effect. One of the things we want to play with though is the exposure setting, because we may want to crank it up a little bit so that it's not too dark, but it keeps the contrast. You can also play around with things like the control of the red, green, the channel mixing. So if we want more, want less red, more, or want more red, want less green, more green, maybe something like that, with a little more green or less green. Let's see what this looks like in other sets. And you could even go to the point of like taking the saturation down and just making it like grayscale, or crank it up to make it really colorful. So let's do something where we add like a little bit of a hue shift going towards red, and we'll crank up the green, or crank it down, crank up the blue, and the red down. Kind of want more of a yellowish color. These are in the different channels, so we just modified the red. For the green, we can maybe put more red in, make it more green, and take some blue out so it goes more yellow. Or would that, yeah. And the blue, we might just take the blue out. There's a whole art to this in terms of being able to change coloring. And this is something you'll see in most movies, like a lot of directors have their own style. The other thing is you can take these grading curves and just start to like play around with shifting the RGB from the color wheel itself. So if you wanted everything to go more yellow or more blue or more purple. So anyway, play around with that. And you could add grain, film grain, which in this case isn't going to be that great, but it basically just creates this animated sort of film grain. So if you try to match something against film, you can use that. We might want to change the size to make it less, maybe 0.5. You can't go smaller on the size. We'll see what it looks like with it. I'm going to turn on vignette as well, which is going to create a dark vignette around the edges. Anyway, we'll play that and see what it looks like. So, we could add fog effects to this to add to the effect. We could create music in the timeline, which would be pretty easy to add. But that's how you get the idea for creating a cutscene. And the idea is to sort of, like, some of these camera edits aren't great, but you could always go back and modify all of these cameras just to create sort of a transition. So he's blurry. We could fix that. Although I don't really mind the blur in the foreground like that. Still looking, and then we do a little zoom out. Kind of a distortion. Anyway, that's prototyping a scene and pretty quickly. I hope you liked it. Thanks.